how do I make multiple loaves of bread on one day but no loaves on another day but still have the exact same starter? So when it comes to a sourdough starter, you are in control about what you do with it. So that's why I recommend having two types of feeds. So we have a baking feed and then we have a maintenance feed. So a maintenance feed is the feed that we feed our starter with every single day that we're not baking, because your starter does need to be fed every single day to keep it active, to keep it alive, to keep it going. But of course, if we're not baking on those days, we still need to do that. Now, when it comes to a sourdough starter, you need to feed it at a minimum of a 1:1:1 ratio, which means that all the ingredients are the same as each other. That's how a ratio works. So of course, if we then went for a 1:2:2 ratio, the two added ingredients, being the flour and the water that we're feeding it with, are twice the amount of the starter. So if we did a 1:5:5, then the two ingredients, being the flour and the water of the feed, are going to be 5 times the amount of the starter. So of course, when we're feeding during a maintenance feed, we want to make sure that we're keeping it as small as possible, because if we had 100 grams of starter and we wanted to do a 1:5:5 ratio, I've then got to feed it with 500 and 500. But did you know that if we took 10 grams of starter and fed it with 50 and 50, we would get the same results, because 50 is 5 times 10. So you need to think about, what do you want your daily maintenance feed to be? How does your starter react the best? Does it like a hefty feed, as in a high ratio? Or do you live in quite a cold house, so you would do a low ratio? So a high ratio works really well in warm environments, because in warm environment makes a sourdough starter rise and fall quicker. But a high ratio takes longer. So to stop that rising so quickly in a warm environment, by doing a high ratio means it slows it down a little bit and then it doesn't get hungry too quickly. And the reverse of that, if you live in a cold environment, then you would feed your starter at a low ratio, because it already is cold and it's taken quite a long time for it to double in size. So feeding it with a low ratio means that it doesn't end up going so sluggish that it doesn't do anything at all. So have a think about what your starter reacts to, and then I recommend doing a 50, 50 and 50 and starting from there. And the reason I recommend that is not because 50 grams, 50 grams and 50 grams is the best. It's because it gives you enough to be able to see what's going on and how it's behaving, but not so much that you're wasting it. But of course, as you become more confident with your starter and you know how it behaves, you could drop down to 10, 10 and 10. That's not a problem at all. So of course, if I then want to make no loaves on a Monday, but 10 loaves on a Tuesday, how do I go from what I've got upwards? So of course, on a Monday, if I fed it at 50, 50 and 50, I've actually got 150. I don't necessarily need to discard any of that, because I now want to make 10 loaves of bread. So of course, I'd work out how much starter do I need for 10 loaves of bread. So if I needed 150 grams for every loaf, that would mean I'd need 1,500 grams of starter, which would be 750 grams of flour and 750 grams of water. But I've already got 150, so I could always just knock off the 250s and do 700, 700 onto the 150. I don't even really need to know what the ratio is, because it doesn't really matter. As long as the two feeds are the same as each other and then are the same or more than the starter that I started with, then I'm fine. So then I'd make my 10 loaves and then I'd be left with 100 grams of starter tomorrow. So then I could either bulk up that 100 grams again to go and then make another 10 loaves of bread, or I could say to myself, well, I've got 100 grams, I'll discard it back down to 50, put the other 50 in my discard jar in the bin or whatever I want to do with it, and then just feed the 50 with 50 and 50. And then that would be my maintenance feed for that day, and then I could do that daily for 4 days. And then if I wanted to then make some loaves on the weekend, I go, I want to make 2 loaves of bread today, so now I need 300. And then I go, right, well, I've got 100 grams of starter or 150 grams of starter. What I'll do is I'll take it back down to a manageable amount, or I'll leave it there, because I think to myself, actually, that's okay, because that gives me a lower ratio, which means it's going to double quicker, or I might actually want it to slow down, so then I would do a higher ratio. I know it feels confusing, but I promise, once you get started and you stop being so scared of wasting your flour and water, because we can do other recipes with the discards, don't panic about that. If the worry of wasting a bit of flour during the learning process is putting you off, that's where you learn, because then you're like, I made too much starter. Next time, I won't make as much. But don't forget, there are other uses for your sourdough starter. Cookies, pancakes, you can even water the garden with it. We'll come back to that in another video, but please don't let that put you off making lots of beautiful sourdough bread.